The next keynote is going to be coming from someone with very great experience. The person I'm introducing is a Mauritanian politician and a biodiversity scientist who served as the 6th president of Mauritius from 2015 to 2018. In December 2014, she was selected to be the presidential candidate of the Alliance LAPIP after Kalisha Pereng resigned on May 29, 2015. Both Prime Minister Sir Anrod Yoganot and the leader of the opposition Paul Barenga positively welcomed her nomination. She was unanimously approved in a vote in the National Assembly of Mauritius. Lady I'm introducing, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, is Her Excellency Gurib-Fakim, and she's the first woman elected as president of a country and is the third woman to have served as head of state, following Queen Elizabeth II and Monique Ohashad's Belapu, who preceded her in the office and was the first vice president. She served as a 2019 keynote speaker of a Cambridge University conference with the theme, Africa Together, Which Way Forward? And that event was hosted by the African Society of Cambridge University. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please do join me as she comes to the podium. Let's join me in welcoming with a very resounding applause Dr. Bibi Ameenah Gurib-Fakim. Your Excellency, ma'am.
Honorable Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Transdrew, Premier of St. Kitts, Delegation of St. Kitts, Nigerian nationals present here, Captain of Industry, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, of course, our dear friend Aisha Maina, who I salute here. Good morning. It is always a great pleasure to be back in the federal capital of Nigeria, the beautiful city of Abuja. I return after a long time, and I'm pleased to see the transformation the city has undergone. Here I would like to thank again Ms. Aisha Maina, Managing Director of Aquarian Consult, for inviting me to speak at this important gathering. This Africa-Caribbean Investment Summit is being organized jointly with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis with a view to enhancing Africa-Caribbean trade and investment for lasting impact. This is important for the African continent inasmuch as the continent is engaging further with its 6th region, the diaspora. So I would like to recognize, before I start my speech, the representative of Afreximbank. And so today my speech will focus on the economic diversification and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa, our dear continent, starts with considerable deficit in spite of its natural advantage of huge asset endowment. The continent of ours is about 30 million square kilometers, representing 20% of the Earth's surface, and she's home to nearly 1.4 billion people, representing 17% of global population, targeting 2.5 billion by 2050, and also home to swath of forests, mineral, among so many riches. Yet, the continent produces only about 3% of global GDP, accounts for less than 3% of global trade, and most of it is dominated by primary commodities and natural resources, and carries 25% of the global disease burden, and accounts for only 2% of world research output, and 1.3% of research spending, and 0.1% of patents. How can a continent with the largest share of the world's remaining arable land, 60%, a continent with the youngest population, a continent that has fueled all of the world's industrial revolutions, a continent that has helped drive the mobile phone industry, a continent that is at the cusp of supporting the world's energy transition to greener technologies with her large store of rare earth mineral deposit accept such dismal statistics. Our challenges, ladies and gentlemen, are fundamental and structural. The deficit of investment in science and technology, an absence of economic and scientific infrastructure for innovation have undermined the process of economic transformation, both at the structural level, the shift of workers and resources from low to higher productivity sectors, and at the sectoral level, the growth of productivity within sectors. The consequences of that deficit have been significant and include continued reliance on the colonial development model of resource extraction, largely responsible for the debilitating poverty trap and aid dependency trap. But the challenges have been compounded by economic fragmentation, with smaller markets constraining long-term investment and injection of patient capital to foster innovation and drive technology transfer in a context of globalization. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AfCFTA, which defragments Africa to establish the largest single market in the world by membership and create the conditions for scale, also lifts one of the most important constraints on the path of economic transformation. But meeting that challenge of economic transformation, a development objective that has eluded Africa for decades, in the AfCFTA era hinges on Africa closing its scientific and technological gap with the rest of the world and sustainably producing the right sets of skills to address supply chain constraint and ultimately expand both extra and intra-Africa trade and sustain higher rates of growth to accelerate the process of global income convergence. Currently, we have a public education system that prescribes rote learning rather than deep independent critical analysis and thinking that is needed to succeed in the knowledge-intensive economies. That system has neglected the sciences, which have been the major drivers of growth and innovation for decades. Just a few statistics for illustration. According to the World Intellectual Property Indicators 2020, offices located in Africa receive 0.5% of all patent applications filed worldwide, compared to 65% in Asia, 20.4% in North America, and 11.3% in Europe. According to UNESCO, Sub-Saharan Africa was home to only 0.7% of world researchers as of 2018, while representing 14% of the global population. In comparison, outperformers such as Denmark, Sweden, Korea, respectively, they have 8,000, over 7,000, and over 7,000 researchers per million people. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest dream of most African graduates is to find a job instead of fostering entrepreneurship and drawing on the creativity and animal spirit to find solutions to economically rewarding problems, and we have so many across our continent. In the medical and pharmaceutical industry, and the COVID-19 crisis has shown, in the housing and urban development as our cities illustrate, in the climate space as our excessive reliance on import of refrigerators and air conditioning illustrates, in the energy sector, the chronic deficit of power across the whole continent, including in South Africa, the most sophisticated economy in the region, illustrates. However, the AfCFTA that aims to unlock manufacturing potential, drawing on the rules of origin to facilitate industrialization, driving sustainable growth and jobs across other objectives will need a different set of skills to fully deliver on its full transformational power. The key boon of manufacturing is that it absorbs large swaths of workers and places them into productive and decent paying jobs. Throughout history, this exact recipe has transformed the United States, United Kingdom, France, Japan, and Germany into some of the world's wealthiest nation. Most recently, a new age of industrialization has helped push China into one of the world's fastest growing economies, boasting the largest middle class, with other Southeast Asian countries following closely behind. These are all examples of how industrialization, through economic diversification, can generate rapid structural change, drive development, and alleviate poverty and unemployment. However, this narrative seems to exclude many African nations. Despite the manufacturing potential and promising trajectories, most African countries have remained largely dearth of factories. This limited industrial development represents a missed opportunity for economic transformation, characterized by the expansion of manufacturing output in a context of a strategic shift of workers and resources from low to higher productivity sectors through the more entry and growth of technologically intensive firms and sustained efforts to foster innovation and the higher productivity sectors. However, the silver lining is the potential. Business-to-business spending in manufacturing in Africa is projected to reach over 600 billion by 2030, over 201 billion more than it did in 2015. Africa is also set to become the next great manufacturing center, potentially capturing more than the 100 billion labor-intensive manufacturing jobs that will leave China by 2030. This trend creates a huge opportunity for the continent, not only for countries like South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, all regional outperformers in the global manufacturing competitive index, but also for the newest players such as Ethiopia, Morocco, Rwanda, and others, all of whom have recently adopted policies enabling manufacturing and industrial development. Today, leaders are increasingly realizing that manufacturing is a major factor in helping Africa realize its development potential and narrow its income and welfare gap with other regions of the world. And the African Union has rightly made industrialization and export diversification the centerpiece of its strategy, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. African governments are seeking new and innovative ways to attract investment and nurture industry, implementing strategies that involve targeted investment infrastructure, improve regional integration, establishment of special economic zone for priority subsectors. However, in order to reach its manufacturing and industrial potential, much needs to be done by the public and private sectors to increase Africa's economic complexity, diversity, competitiveness, and productivity. After all, to reverse the trend and to compete in an intensely globalized world, we need to take a big leap forward fueled by innovation. We also need an innovation system that can deliver new manufacturing technologies and processes to get us there. Ladies and gentlemen, at the macroeconomic level, countries across Africa have been chronically dependent on aid, I think until recently, and urgently need to turn their attention to attracting private investment and venture capital, marshalling innovation. But it is not all gloom and doom. Africa has the youngest population of any continent. According to the World Economic Forum, the median age among the 10 youngest countries on the African continent range from the age of 14 to 18. We ignore this significant demographic asset at our peril. This inexorable trend means that by 2034, Africans will be home to the world's largest number of working age adults. The World Bank estimates that 11 to 15% GDP growth over the next 20 years will be attributable to these favorable demographics. The energy is palpable with world-class innovation emerging from technologies incubators in cities from Kigali to Harare and to Lagos. Ladies and gentlemen, as we explore the best strategies to build and sustain research and development capacity for the Africa's economic growth and economic and social well-being, we need to take a look how science, technology, and innovation can be better mobilized to propel us in our journey to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and the African Union Commission's Agenda 2063. Fortunately, there are many nascent success stories that we can draw upon and that need to be replicated speedily at scale. In certain sectors of technology, entrepreneurship, and application, we know that we are pivoting to a better place. The energy is palpable. We see this most prominent in telecommunication. In 2006, according to The Economist, there were fewer than 13 million landlines and 130 million subscriptions to mobile phones in all of Africa. Today, over 1 billion of the continent's 1.4 billion people have access to mobile phones. These, in turn, have served as a platform for innovation and in the efficiency delivery of services. Of particular note of financial services and mobile money initially developed in East Africa and spreading across the continent. Across sub-Saharan Africa, relatively few people have traditionally qualified for bank accounts. But today, everything from bananas in the marketplace to software for our PCs is purchased through the mobile money platform in Kenya, M-Pesa. Afrexim Bank, Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, which is set to facilitate payment for cross-border trade in Africa currencies, will not only assuage the liquidity constraint, it will also push the boundaries of efficiency and productivity at the continental level with significant implications for growth and structural transformation. Indeed, the GSMA, an International Telecommunication Trade Organization, notes that for every 10% increase in phone penetration in poorer countries, productivity improves by more than 4 percentage points, and that a doubling in mobile data usage increases annual per capita GDP growth by 0.5 percentage point. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. M-Copper is an energy startup built on the mobile money platform M-Pesa, enabling families to purchase clean home energies in payment as small as 50 cents. M-Copper brings solar energy to more than 500 new households every day, totaling over 500,000 East African homes, and they were previously unreached by power lines. With only 1 in 3 Africans having access to energy, energy security is crucial to fighting poverty, improving productivity, and sustaining the growth of output, especially industrial output, and nurturing the next generation of scientists. Today, these families receive over 62.5 million hours of clean solar energy per month through this technology. And as a business enterprise and contributor to the economy, M-Copper has raised well over $50 million in venture capital, providing full-time jobs to over 1,000 people and retaining over 1,500 sales agents. Ladies and gentlemen, as these few success stories show, there is greater recognition about the role of STI can play in achieving national development goals, and the challenge is to maintain the momentum. Shining examples of world-class innovation in Africa are emerging, for example, from technology incubators, creating techies across the continent. As a result, Africa is attracting capital investment necessary to build industry that is sustainable in the long term, rather than further cultivating the dependence, which is by nature short-term and has never led to either the development or structural transformation of any region or any country. Whether in the realms of energy, banking, communication, medicine, the major drivers of growth, productivity gains have been science, technology, and innovation. In fact, the 1970s, the world has moved from organization change-driven growth to technological change-driven growth. No wonder the largest corporations and companies on Wall Street have become tech companies, which account for a high percentage of total market capitalization. The key questions then is, what are the policies, skills, and contours of the scientific ecosystem that will foster sustainable growth of scientific technological innovation to sustain and accelerate the process of economic transformation? We must seek to establish the proof of principle that world-class Pan-African science and innovation can be mobilized for tackling Africa's deep and entrenched development challenges led by Africans in Africa, with priorities set by Africa, for Africa, and in strong partnership with the international community. In this way, Africa can claim its rightful place as a global driver of prosperity for the benefit of all. How can we contribute to tackling our challenges? It is by building dramatically scaled-up infrastructure for research, helping create the right policy environment, supporting sound governance of our institutions, and most of all, investing and unleashing the scientific capacity of people. And of course, one mustn't forget women. We know the best trained, most talented researchers naturally gravitate to environment where their work is leveraged by modern equipment, reliable utilities, and sufficient funding for supplies, and more critically, benefiting from the presence of other talented people. Africa's brain drain must be transformed into Africa's brain gain by creating research infrastructure that rivals the best in the world right here at home. Our only success will beget success. The aim is for Africa-centric investment to create a virtuous cycle of talent attracting talent, boosting training, working to retain the trained talent is to tackle Africa's development challenges and sustain the process of economic transformation over time. And at the same time, we must realize about the magnitude of aspiration. Every step in the research ladder must be systematically enforced. For example, today's world-class postdoctoral fellowship in African laboratories are virtually non-existent, forcing our best PhDs with a great potential to seek training overseas, and many of whom end up contributing to the proverbial brain drain. So this is a collective loss, and we provide major subsidies to the new host country, often more industrialized economies, which are always very quick to trumpet their generosity under the debilitating aid-dependent model. Ladies and gentlemen, those dedicated to building a thriving, self-sustaining Africa, where science is the new lifeblood of economic transformation in our beloved continent, are invited to bring the stone so that we can move mountains together. Starting with politicians and bankers who hold the purse, and then every young African who has the potential to be great scientists must work hard to realize his potential for the benefit of the continent and humanity. And then the private sector, which must rely on African scientists to innovate and become globally competitive to sustain the transformation of African continent economies. And then over time, and through a vibrant public-private partnership for economic transformation supported by African scientists, the process of continued innovation and scientific endeavors will expand the power of Africa's purses and reduce its excessive dependence on externally debt financing. But creating an ecosystem where the scientific culture becomes central to economic transformation and policy-making decision process is a long-term investment that should not be affected by either political or business cycles. Hence, to achieve a success in the path of economic transformation, effective collaboration under that tripartite public-private academia partnership for economic transformation must be sustained over time. There is an African proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And I hope we can all bring many seedlings and shovels and plant many trees that will flower together, nurtured by the best scientific knowledge available and the talents of Africans. It can be done. As responsible stewards of the earth, and specifically for our beloved continent, it must be done so that the benefits of science, technology, innovation are marshaled for greater economic, social, environmental sustainability, both on the continent and beyond. I thank you for your attention.